The Silent Veil, Part 2. Chapter 14, A Locket in the Ashes. Lenora's breath hitched as Edgar's voice echoed from above, his footsteps slow, deliberate, descending into the crypt where the air had grown heavier, the stone walls pressing in as if they too were listening. The locket in her trembling fingers had changed everything, the name scrawled in faded ink beneath Sebastian's, Edgar Ravenshade, coiling through her mind like a serpent tightening its grip. Impossible, unthinkable, yet undeniably real. Edgar, the man who had suffered at his brother's hands, the man who had lived in the shadows of Blackvale's ruin, the man she had trusted, carried a name that did not belong inside this locket. And yet there it was, etched into history, an unspoken truth buried beneath dust and time. The crypt's candlelight flickered violently as Edgar reached the last step, his figure framed by the firelight above, casting his face into sharp relief, his expression unreadable, too carefully composed, too restrained, as if waiting to see what she would do. Lenora forced herself to stand, the locket burning against her palm, her pulse hammering, the air between them thick with something unspoken, something dangerous. "Lenora," Edgar said, his voice steady, quiet, searching. "What are you doing down here?" She swallowed, words failing her, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest like unseen hands tightening around her ribs. Her fingers curled around the locket, hiding its open face from his view. "I was looking for you," she managed, voice hollow, uncertain. "You disappeared." Edgar took another step forward, his boots scuffing against the crypt floor, his presence close enough to suffocate. "I went to the west wing," he murmured, glancing briefly at the surrounding walls, at the lingering darkness clinging to the edges of the chamber. "I thought I heard something inside the walls." The walls. Lenora's stomach turned, her mind flashing back to the whispers that had curled through the cracks of Ravenshade House, the voices that had drawn her here, the sound of something buried beneath the floorboards, of Evangeline's voice pleading to be found before he did. Edgar's eyes flickered to her hand, to the locket clutched between her fingers. His gaze darkened just slightly, barely perceptible, but she saw it. "What are you holding?" The question came softly, too controlled, too measured. Lenora hesitated, her fingers tightening instinctively around the delicate piece of silver, her body screaming at her not to show him. "A locket," she admitted, her voice careful, watching him, waiting. Edgar didn't move. Didn't blink. "Where did you find it?" She licked her lips, her throat dry, her mind calculating the right answer, searching for a lie that would sound believable, but something inside her whispered he already knows. "Here," she whispered, half-truths slipping between her teeth. Edgar's eyes remained locked on hers, the silence stretching too long, stretching into something unbearable. Then, he extended his hand. "Let me see it." Lenora's breath came in short, sharp bursts, her body tense, muscles wound tight, the weight of every decision she had made since stepping into this house pressing upon her like a warning she could no longer ignore. If she gave it to him, she would lose the chance to understand, to uncover what this house was trying to show her, what Clara had been trying to tell her through the veil. If she refused, she would be drawing a line between them, one that could not be erased. Her heart pounded against her ribs as the candlelight wavered, flickering shadows dancing over Edgar's face, the tension between them shifting, changing, no longer the safe familiarity it once had been, but something other, something dangerous. "No," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but firm, final. Edgar's expression did not shift, did not crack, but something in the air did. The house responded, the walls groaning, the floor beneath them shuddering ever so slightly, the crypt holding its breath, waiting. Edgar did not lower his hand, did not move, but the moment stretched between them, charged, suffocating. "Lenora," he said again, softer now, the way one might soothe a frightened animal. "You should give it to me." A shiver crawled up her spine, her instincts screaming, warning her this is not the Edgar you know. "Why?" she pressed, her grip on the locket tightening. Edgar's eyes flickered, the briefest hesitation, and then, smooth as silk, "Because I asked you to." The air in the crypt was wrong now, thick with something unseen, something listening. Lenora's breath hitched. He was lying. Edgar Ravenshade was lying. The shadows in the corners of the crypt stirred, as if something ancient had taken notice of them, as if the house itself was waiting for her decision. The candle flame trembled, nearly extinguished by an unseen breath, and then, above them, a sound. The groan of shifting wood. The crack of something heavy moving inside the walls. And then, the trapdoor slammed shut. The noise was deafening, echoing through the chamber, sealing them inside, cutting off the only exit, plunging them into a silence so thick it pressed against Lenora's skin like a second layer. Edgar's head snapped toward the trapdoor, his jaw tightening. Lenora's heart raced. The house was reacting. It had chosen. A gust of cold air curled around her shoulders, a whisper brushing against her ear, barely audible but clear as a bell. Run. Lenora's breath caught. The whisper was not from the walls. Not from the crypt. Not from the house. It had come from the locket. She turned on instinct, her feet moving before her mind could catch up, her pulse roaring as she bolted toward the farthest end of the crypt, the candlelight flaring wildly in protest. Behind her, Edgar cursed under his breath, his boots striking the stone as he moved. She didn't know if he was chasing her or following, didn't know if he was calling her name, didn't know what was waiting for her in the darkness ahead. But she knew one thing with certainty: the house was waking up. And it was not done with her yet. Chapter 15, A Heart Buried Twice. Lenora ran. The crypt walls stretched endlessly in the dim candlelight, the flickering glow unable to push back the weight of the darkness pressing in from all sides. The air was thick with dampness, the scent of earth and rot clinging to her skin, suffocating her with every breath. Behind her, Edgar's footsteps followed, steady, deliberate, neither hurried nor frantic, as if he knew something she did not, as if he was merely waiting for her to understand that running would do no good. The walls groaned, the floor shuddering beneath her boots, unseen things shifting in the spaces beyond the stone, whispers curling through the cracks like restless fingers reaching for something lost. She should never have come down here, never have followed the whispers, never have taken the locket. The locket. The cold weight of it pulsed against her palm, a rhythmic, unnatural heartbeat in her grasp, as if the silver itself was alive, as if the name written inside, Edgar Ravenshade, was trying to drag her deeper, trying to make her see what had been hidden. Her lungs burned as she pushed forward, the path ahead narrowing, stone archways pressing closer, the shadows thickening. The crypt was changing. Twisting. Warping into something unfamiliar, as if the house itself had decided that if she would not listen, then it would show her what she refused to see. A gust of air rushed past her, impossibly cold, stealing the heat from her skin, and suddenly, she was not alone. She felt it behind her, not Edgar, not anything living, but something older, something that had been waiting. She didn't dare turn, didn't dare acknowledge it, but the weight of it bore down on her shoulders, breathing against the nape of her neck, whispering in voices she could not understand, voices tangled in time, in pain, in things buried beneath stone and silence. The ground beneath her feet shifted. A step too far and suddenly the floor was gone. She plunged forward, crashing onto uneven stone, the impact jarring through her bones as the candle flew from her grasp and snuffed out, plunging her into utter blackness. Pain lanced through her palms, her knees scraped raw against the jagged surface, the scent of dust and old decay rushing into her lungs. The crypt was still, silent, the kind of silence that existed only in graves. Her breath came in uneven gasps, her pulse hammering, her fingers splaying against the stone as she tried to push herself upright. The darkness was impenetrable. She could hear nothing. Not Edgar. Not the house. Not even the whispers. Only her own ragged breathing and the weight of something unseen waiting in the dark. Then, a sound. Not footsteps. Not voices. But something soft. Wet. A heartbeat that did not belong to her. Her fingers clenched against the stone, the air turning heavy with a scent she recognized instantly. Blood. The whisper that had followed her from the moment she set foot in this house curled through the suffocating dark, gentle, coaxing, "Look, Lenora." Her body refused, every muscle screaming against it, but her head turned regardless, as if something else had reached inside her mind and commanded her to obey. And she saw it. In the blackness, a shape, barely distinguishable at first, but then the outline formed, familiar, horrifying. A body. Half buried in the stone. Hands folded over its chest in an eerie mockery of rest. And beneath the veil of dust and time, beneath the dried, brittle fabric of its clothing, a silver chain glinted faintly in the candle's dying glow. A locket. Just like hers. Just like Clara's. Lenora's breath caught, a raw, strangled sound escaping her throat. The name inside her locket burned into her mind like a brand. Edgar Ravenshade. The crypt was not merely a tomb for the forgotten. It was a graveyard of secrets. And Edgar had already been buried once before. The silence shattered. Footsteps echoed from the corridor she had left behind, slow, measured, unhurried. And then his voice. Edgar. Low, steady, coming closer. Lenora. She scrambled backward, her hands scraping against stone, her heart a frantic hammering inside her chest, the weight of everything unraveling around her. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. He was alive. He had survived Blackvale. She had held his hand. She had saved him. And yet, the body in the crypt lay beneath her, entombed in stone, untouched by time. She forced her voice through the terror strangling her throat. What is this? Her breath hitched, her body stiff as he emerged from the darkness. His figure loomed, his shadow stretching across the crypt floor, firelight glinting in his eyes as he studied her, studied the body at her feet. His expression did not change. He did not falter, did not recoil, did not even seem surprised. He simply looked at her, and said, "You weren't supposed to find that." The words hit her like a cold blade pressed against the skin. Her stomach twisted violently, every thought fracturing beneath the weight of realization. "What are you?" The words barely escaped her lips, but she saw the flicker of something in his expression, something dark, something ancient. He took another step toward her, slow, deliberate. "I am Edgar Ravenshade." A lie. A truth. Something else. The crypt groaned around them, dust falling from the ceiling, the weight of the house pressing inward, angry, hungry. Lenora's fingers curled around the locket in her palm, the silver burning against her skin, the whispers rising in a crescendo of voices tangled in time, in warning, in despair. She had trusted him. She had saved him. But now she knew, Edgar Ravenshade had already died once before. And whatever was standing before her now, whatever had been pulled from the ashes of Blackvale, was something else entirely. Chapter 16, The Raven's Return. Lenora's breath came in ragged gasps, her fingers tightening around the locket as Edgar's words settled over her like a noose. "I am Edgar Ravenshade." A truth. A lie. A warning. The crypt was suffocating, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and something deeper, something metallic, something wrong. The body beneath the dust remained still, entombed in the earth, yet the man standing before her bore the same name. Her mind reeled, logic splintering beneath the weight of the impossible. If Edgar had already been buried here, then who, what, had she pulled from the ruins of Blackvale? The firelight flickered against his face, sharp angles, familiar, but now she saw something else in his gaze, something hidden beneath the surface, something waiting. He was watching her, studying her reaction, waiting for the pieces to fall into place, waiting for her to understand. The locket in her palm pulsed like a second heartbeat, the whispers curling around her skin like unseen fingers, urging her forward, urging her to see what had been buried in the dark. "You're lying," she said, but even as the words left her lips, they rang hollow, unconvincing. Edgar tilted his head slightly, the movement almost lazy, almost indulgent. "Am I?" The weight of the house pressed in around them, the stone walls groaning, the shadows shifting in the edges of her vision. The crypt was waking, stirring, responding to the unraveling truth, to the fractures forming in reality itself. The whispers had warned her. The locket had warned her. Clara had warned her. You must finish what was started. The body at her feet had been dead for decades. So why did Edgar Ravenshade stand before her now, flesh and blood, breathing, whole? The world tipped sideways. Her pulse thundered against her ribs, her body screaming for movement, for distance, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from him, from the way he simply waited for her to understand. "How long?" she whispered, her throat tightening, her voice barely audible over the growing sound of the walls shifting, the crypt adjusting, closing in. Edgar's gaze flickered, something passing through his expression, an amusement, a flicker of something almost resembling regret. "Does it matter?" The walls groaned. The house was listening. The house knew. Lenora felt her breath shudder out of her as the realization sank deep, clawing at her mind, at her chest, at her very bones. "You died," she said, and this time, the words were not a question. The stillness that followed was deafening. Then, a slow, deliberate step forward. Edgar Ravenshade, or the thing wearing his name, lowered his voice to something just above a whisper, something that curled around her like a noose. "And yet, here I stand." The crypt shuddered. The candlelight guttered. The voices in the walls rose in a frenzy of whispers, some pleading, some mourning, some screaming. The locket in her palm burned, a searing heat that spread up her arm, flooding her veins with something foreign, something ancient, something alive. The silver had never been warm before. Not in Clara's hands. Not in hers. But now, it was pulsing, reacting, choosing. The house was choosing. Lenora staggered back, her boots scraping against the uneven stone, her balance faltering. "No," she breathed, shaking her head, the weight of truth pressing against her ribs like an iron cage. "No, this isn't possible." Edgar watched her, unreadable, unmoving, and for the first time, she saw the truth behind his eyes, not just the familiarity of the man she had saved, not just the firelight reflecting in his gaze, but something deeper. Something older. Something that had been waiting for her from the moment she stepped inside Ravenshade House. "You already know the answer, Lenora," Edgar murmured, his voice steady, patient, as if speaking to a child. "You've known since the moment you opened the locket. Since the moment you felt the house shift. Since the moment you heard the whispers calling your name." The crypt groaned, the stone beneath them fracturing just slightly, a fine crack splintering outward from the coffin at their feet. The body inside did not stir. It had no need to. The truth was already standing above it. Lenora's breath hitched, her entire body cold despite the firelight licking at the edges of her vision. "What are you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Edgar smiled. Slowly. Coldly. "I am what the house made me." The candlelight snuffed out. The crypt plunged into darkness. And somewhere, deep within the walls, something laughed. Chapter 17, The House That Hungers. Darkness swallowed Lenora whole, thick and absolute, pressing against her skin like unseen hands tightening around her throat. The candlelight was gone, snuffed out in an instant, leaving nothing but the echo of Edgar's voice curling through the blackness, his last words lingering in the air like smoke. "I am what the house made me." The locket in her palm burned hot against her skin, the metal pulsing like a heartbeat, like something alive, something desperate, something waiting for her to understand. The crypt was no longer silent. The walls were breathing. A slow, shuddering inhale, an exhale that came from nowhere and everywhere, a sound that slithered through the stone, through the bones buried beneath it, through the weight of centuries forgotten. Something else was waking. Something else was listening. Lenora's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps, her hands trembling, her pulse hammering in her ears as she stepped back blindly, her boots scraping against the uneven floor, the crypt shifting around her as if it, too, had been waiting for this moment. A whisper, soft and insidious, brushed against her ear, not from Edgar, not from the locket, but from the house itself, a voice woven from the bones of those who had come before her, those who had not escaped. He is not the first. And you will not be the last. Her spine went rigid, ice sinking into her veins, the truth settling deep, deeper than she wanted, deeper than she had been willing to admit. The house did not simply hold its dead. It kept them. It shaped them, molded them, used them. Edgar had died here once before. But death was not the end. Not in Ravenshade House. Lenora turned sharply, trying to push through the suffocating dark, trying to find the exit, trying to breathe, but the crypt had changed. The walls had moved. The archway she had entered through was gone, swallowed by the stone, by the house itself, by the thing that was no longer content with watching from the shadows. She was trapped. Not just in the crypt. Not just in the house. But in something deeper, something unseen, something that had been waiting for her far longer than she had been waiting for answers. A step behind her. Slow. Measured. Certain. Edgar was still there. He had not left. He had not vanished like the masked stranger, had not retreated like the whispers in the walls. He remained. Because he was part of this place. Because he belonged to it. What does it want? Lenora's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence, sharp, unsteady, filled with something raw and desperate. Edgar did not answer immediately. His figure loomed in the dark, shifting slightly, the outline of his presence wrong, as if he was both there and not there, both alive and something else entirely. Then, he said it. Calm. Quiet. Certain. You. Lenora's stomach lurched, her entire body stiffening as the word slithered into her ears, curling around her throat like a hand ready to squeeze. Her pulse thundered, her grip tightening around the locket as if it could protect her, as if the silver could ward off the truth pressing in from all sides. She had known, hadn't she? Since the moment she arrived, since the moment she stepped through the gates, since the moment the whispers had spoken her name. This house had not simply been calling her. It had been waiting for her. No, she whispered, shaking her head, stepping back blindly, her shoulders hitting the cold stone wall, the reality of it pressing into her spine, the weight of the house closing in. No, that's not, I was never supposed to be part of this. Edgar exhaled, slow and deliberate, as if he had heard these same words before, as if he had stood in this very spot once, had begged for a different fate, had pleaded for another ending. But the house did not bargain. The house did not release what it had claimed. None of us were, Edgar murmured, and for the first time, there was something in his voice that almost, resembled regret. The floor beneath Lenora's feet shuddered. A deep, slow crack splintered through the stone, the ground groaning as if something beneath it was moving, shifting, waking. Then came the whispers, not soft this time, not gentle, not distant, but louder, rising, overlapping in a frenzy, screaming without sound, shrieking in voices long buried, voices that had tried to warn her, voices that had failed. He is lying. Run. The house is starving. He is not what he was. You are next. Lenora gasped, her head spinning, the voices clawing at her skull, at her skin, at her sanity. The house was not just keeping its dead. It was feeding off them. It had taken Edgar, taken Clara, taken Evangeline, taken the names that had been scrubbed from its history, consumed them, made them part of it. And now, it wanted her. A hand closed around her wrist. Cold. Familiar. Real. Edgar. She jerked violently, trying to pull away, but his grip was iron, unyielding, his strength inhuman, the weight of him wrong. He did not pull her toward him. He did not restrain her. He simply held her in place, as if waiting for the house to do the rest. "You need to stop fighting," Edgar said, and his voice was gentle, almost soothing, almost like before, almost like the man she had known, but she could feel it now, feel the difference, feel the thing beneath his skin that was no longer him. "Let go." Lenora thrashed, a strangled cry tearing from her throat, her free hand clawing at his fingers, at anything, nails scraping against flesh, against something cold and smooth beneath the surface, something that was not bone, not muscle, not human. "No, no, you're not him, you're not," the floor split open beneath her. A black chasm, endless, yawning wide at her feet, a grave without a bottom, a mouth ready to consume, the house opening to claim what it had already decided belonged to it. Edgar did not release her. His grip did not falter. His expression did not change. Because he was no longer a man. Because he was the house now. And the house had already won. Lenora's breath came fast, panicked, desperate, the locket in her palm burning, the voices screaming, the black void below waiting. Then, a sound. Distant. Sharp. A door slamming open above them. A voice shouting her name. Not Edgar's. Someone else's. A figure crashing through the crypt's entrance, running, running, running toward her. A hand grabbing Edgar's shoulder, wrenching him back. And suddenly, Lenora was falling forward instead of down, yanked away from the abyss, away from the house, away from the thing that had worn Edgar's name. The locket ripped from her fingers, tumbling into the black void. She hit the ground hard, her lungs heaving, the taste of blood sharp on her tongue. Hands steadied her, pulling her up, pulling her away. Lenora. The voice was real. Familiar. Alive. She blinked wildly, her vision blurred, her pulse deafening, her hands trembling as she turned, and saw him. The masked stranger. The man who had been watching. The man the house did not control. His fingers tightened around her arm, pulling her toward the crypt's exit, away from Edgar, away from the hunger, away from the grave that had been waiting for her. Run. His voice was not a whisper. Not a suggestion. It was a command. And this time, she obeyed. Chapter 18, The House Remembers. Lenora ran, her breath ragged, her vision blurred, her pulse hammering in her skull as the masked stranger pulled her through the crypt's narrow corridors, his grip firm, unyielding, dragging her away from the thing that had worn Edgar's name. Behind them, the house roared, the walls shuddering, the stone beneath their feet cracking with the force of something ancient, something enraged, something that had been denied its prize. The locket was gone, swallowed by the abyss, and with it, the last tether to whatever had been keeping Edgar bound to flesh and bone. But it was not enough. The house wanted more. It wanted her. The darkness twisted, shifting in unnatural waves, the flickering firelight stretching shadows into impossible shapes that reached for her, grasping, clawing, desperate to keep her inside, to finish what had been started, to pull her into its depths and consume her whole. The masked stranger did not slow. His movements were precise, determined, as if he had navigated this place before, as if he knew exactly where to go. Lenora stumbled over uneven stone, the air growing heavier, thicker, pressing against her chest like unseen hands trying to suffocate the breath from her lungs. A whisper curled through the corridor, soft at first, then growing louder, rising in a crescendo of voices tangled in time, crying out from the walls, the floors, the very bones of the house itself. She belongs to us. She cannot leave. She was chosen. 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 The masked stranger yanked her forward, his grip tightening as the whispers turned to shrieks, a piercing wail that rattled through the corridors, shaking the very foundation of the house, sending dust and debris tumbling from the ceiling. Ahead of them, the crypt's exit loomed, a narrow archway leading back into the house's main halls, the only sliver of light cutting through the suffocating dark. But the house was faster. The door slammed shut just as they reached it, the sound echoing like a death knell, the very stone walls shifting, warping, twisting into something new, something wrong. The masked stranger came to an abrupt halt, his head snapping toward the sealed exit, his free hand pressing against the surface as if feeling for something unseen, something hidden beneath the layers of stone and time. Lenora's chest rose and fell in sharp, uneven bursts, her heart pounding against her ribs as she turned back toward the corridor behind them. The whispers had stopped. The shadows had gone still. And Edgar Ravenshade was standing there, waiting. He did not move. Did not blink. Did not breathe. The flickering light cast his face into sharp relief, but it was no longer the face she recognized. His features had hollowed, his skin pale, his eyes, God, his eyes, black pits of nothingness, reflecting no light, holding no warmth, only a deep, endless hunger. The thing inside him, the house, the whispers, the unseen thing that had shaped him into what he had become, was watching. Waiting. Deciding. Lenora. His voice was wrong, layered, something else speaking beneath it, something old and patient. This is not how it ends. The masked stranger stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body, his presence a barrier between her and the thing that had once been Edgar. His stance was unmoving, his fingers curling into fists at his sides, his voice calm but edged with something sharp, something final. She does not belong to you. The shadows writhed. The walls groaned. Edgar's expression did not change, but something flickered in the black void of his gaze, something like amusement, something like understanding. We shall see. Then he moved, faster than any living thing should, the darkness bending with him, rushing forward like a tidal wave, consuming the air, the space, the very ground beneath them. Lenora barely had time to scream. The masked stranger grabbed her arm, ripped her away, and suddenly the walls around them were not the same, the crypt was gone, the corridor was gone, the house had shifted again, changed again, reshaped itself into something new. They were somewhere else. Somewhere deeper. Somewhere worse. The air was stale, damp, thick with the scent of decay and old, rotting wood. Lenora stumbled, gasping, her legs weak beneath her, her body trembling with the weight of what had just happened. The masked stranger steadied her, his grip firm but careful, his head turning sharply as if listening for something. Lenora forced herself to swallow, her throat dry, her skin cold. Where? Her voice came out hoarse, shaking. Where are we? The masked stranger hesitated, then exhaled slowly, his voice low, quiet. The part of the house no one was ever meant to find. Lenora's stomach dropped. The room was vast, too vast, stretching endlessly into the dark, the walls barely visible beyond the dim glow of distant candlelight flickering from unseen sconces. The floor was made of old, warped wood, the planks uneven, cracked, damp with something dark that had long since dried. And then she saw them. Doors. Dozens of them. Lining the walls, stretching up toward a ceiling lost in shadows, doors of every shape, every size, all of them sealed. Some looked ancient, rotted with time, their frames barely holding together. Others were pristine, polished, gleaming with ornate golden handles, untouched by dust, untouched by time. And then there were the ones in between, half broken, half burned, shattered as if something had tried to escape. Lenora took a step forward, her breath shallow, her pulse hammering. The whispers had returned. But not from the walls. Not from the floor. From the doors. Low, distant, muffled voices calling from behind them, pleading, sobbing, whispering names lost to time, whispering stories that had never been told. She turned to the masked stranger, her voice barely above a breath. What is this place? He did not answer at first. His gaze remained locked on the doors, unreadable, unmoving, the weight of something unsaid pressing down on his shoulders like a burden too heavy to carry. Then, finally, he spoke. The ones the house kept. A chill raced through Lenora's spine. She didn't need to ask what he meant. She already knew. This house did not simply consume. It did not simply kill. It kept its dead. And the doors were their graves. The whispers behind them grew louder, rising into a cacophony of voices tangled together, overlapping, pressing against the doors from the other side, begging to be heard, begging to be remembered, begging to be released. Lenora's hands curled into fists at her sides, her breath shaking, her entire body cold. Clara had been right. The truth must be taken carefully, Lenora. And once you open that locket completely, there will be no turning back. But the locket was gone. The abyss had taken it. The house had stolen it back. She had no more warnings. No more choices. Only this. The masked stranger turned to her then, his voice steady, deliberate. If we stay here, the house will find us again. His gaze flickered to the doors. We have to choose one. Lenora swallowed hard, her hands trembling. The house had kept them for a reason. And now, she had to set one of them free. Chapter 19, The Door That Should Never Open. Lenora's breath came in sharp, uneven bursts, her hands shaking at her sides as she stood in the vast, endless corridor of doors, the whispers pressing against the wood from the other side, voices tangled in sorrow and rage, in pleading and warning, in secrets buried so deep that time itself had forgotten them. The masked stranger remained silent beside her, his gaze fixed on the doors, his presence unwavering, steady, but there was something unreadable in his stillness, something restrained, something that told her that even he, this man who had seemed to know everything, who had walked the house's corridors as if he belonged to them, was not immune to what lay behind these doors. The air was heavy, pressing against her lungs, thick with something unseen, something old, something that had been waiting. The doors were different from one another, some ancient and splintered, others pristine and untouched, but all of them sealed, held shut by something stronger than locks, stronger than time. The whispers were growing louder now, some in languages she did not understand, some in voices too familiar, curling around her ears like smoke, slipping through the cracks beneath the doors, calling to her, waiting for her to choose. She did not want to choose. She did not want to know what lay beyond them. But the house would not let her leave without an answer. The masked stranger turned his head slightly, his voice low, careful, measured. We do not have much time. Lenora swallowed, her throat dry, the weight of the decision tightening around her ribs like a vice. How do we know which one? He was quiet for a moment, then he simply said, we don't. The word settled deep, an anchor of dread sinking into her stomach. She turned back toward the endless hallway, toward the doors that stretched upward into shadow, each one a grave for something the house had chosen to keep, something that had never been given the chance to escape. Her fingers trembled at her sides. The house had not merely trapped the dead. It had silenced them. The whispers rose again, louder now, more desperate, the doors trembling slightly beneath invisible hands, something behind them pressing, pushing, trying to get out. She took a slow, unsteady step forward, her heart pounding against her ribs, her body screaming at her to stop, to turn back, to run. The masked stranger did not stop her. He only watched. The house was waiting. The choice had to be made. Then, one door moved. Not all of them. Not most of them. Just one. A single door near the center of the hall, its wood dark, untouched by rot, but the handle was stained, blackened with something old, something long dried, something that had once been red. Lenora's breath hitched, her pulse deafening in her ears. The whispers behind this door were not like the others. They did not plead. They did not beg. They did not scream. They spoke. And they spoke her name. Her chest tightened. Lenora. The sound was soft, breathless, curling beneath the threshold like mist, wrapping around her ankles, waiting. She knew that voice. Knew it as surely as she knew her own. It was impossible. It was wrong. But it was there. And it was waiting for her to open the door. Her fingers twitched at her side, her mind spinning, her entire body fighting against the pull of it. But she took another step forward. Lenora. The masked stranger shifted slightly, his posture tense, but he did not stop her. He did not speak. He only watched. The whispers pressed harder against the door, as if sensing her hesitation, as if urging her forward, as if this was what the house had always intended. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold metal handle, her breath catching in her throat as the whispers stilled, the silence pressing so thick that it swallowed the air from the room, from her lungs, from her mind. A pause. A breath. Then, she turned the handle. The door opened. A wave of cold rushed over her, knocking the air from her chest, not just cold, absence, void, nothingness curling around her bones, wrapping around her throat, pulling her forward before she could stop it. The world twisted. The floor disappeared. The air vanished. And then she was falling. The door was gone. The corridor was gone. The masked stranger was gone. There was only darkness, deep and endless, swallowing her whole, pressing into her skin, into her mind, into her very soul. The whispers were no longer outside the door. They were inside her now. And they were laughing. Then, a light. Faint. Distant. Flickering like the last breath of a dying candle. It was below her, but somehow also all around her, pulling her toward it, drawing her into something that was not of this world, something the house had hidden, something it had never meant for her to see. The light grew, taking shape, shifting into something familiar, something horrible. The ruins of Blackvale Manor. She landed hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs, her hands slamming against cold stone, but she did not hit the floor of the crypt, did not return to Ravenshade House. She was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere lost to time. Somewhere buried in ash and ruin. She gasped, pushing herself upright, her limbs shaking, her vision blurred, the scent of fire and blood thick in the air. And then she saw her. Standing at the center of the wreckage, her midnight blue gown untouched by the soot, her dark curls falling in perfect waves over her shoulders, her expression unreadable. Clara Ravenshade. But not as she had seen her before. Not as a whisper in the veil, not as a ghost behind a portrait, not as a memory trapped within the house. Clara Ravenshade was alive. And she was looking directly at her. The world tilted. Lenora's breath came in sharp, painful bursts, the ground beneath her shifting, warping, twisting into something else. Clara took a step forward, her hands folding in front of her, her dark eyes calm, but beneath the surface, something simmered. Not sorrow. Not relief. Not even anger. Expectation. Clara Ravenshade had been waiting for her. The whispers in the shadows shifted, watching, waiting, silent for the first time since Lenora had entered the house. And then Clara spoke. Soft. Deliberate. Final. Welcome to the end, Lenora. The ground shattered beneath her feet. And the truth finally began to rise. Chapter 20, The Dead Do Not Forget. Lenora fell to her knees as the ground beneath her twisted, warping, reshaping itself into something unnatural, something caught between memory and ruin, between past and present, between the moment Blackvale Manor had burned and the moment it had been forgotten. The air was thick with the scent of charred wood and scorched velvet, of something deeper, something metallic, something old and unforgiving. Ash swirled around her, drifting through the air like dying embers, the remnants of a house that had not simply been destroyed but had been consumed by something far worse. Clara Ravenshade stood before her, untouched by the ruin surrounding them, her midnight blue gown pristine, her dark curls unmarked by dust or time, her presence impossibly still, watching, waiting, expecting. Lenora tried to stand, her legs trembling beneath her, the weight of everything pressing against her chest like unseen hands, clawing at her lungs, stealing the breath from her throat, but the moment she moved, the whispers returned. Not the hushed, distant voices that had haunted the halls of Ravenshade House, not the restless murmurs trapped behind the doors, but something else, something louder, something alive. They rushed into her mind, flooding her skull with voices, with screams, with memories that were not her own. A woman sobbing in the dark, her fingers bleeding as they scraped against locked doors. A child whispering a name over and over, voice trembling, voice unheard. A man laughing, his hand closing around a silver locket, his reflection flickering in the glass, shifting, changing, becoming something inhuman. And then, fire. Fire everywhere. Black veil burning, the walls collapsing, the ceiling shattering, the house itself screaming as the flames devoured it whole, as the souls trapped inside it were swallowed, as the truth was buried beneath the ash and the ruin and the lies. Lenora gasped, the visions slamming into her like a physical blow, her hands clutching her head as she tried to force them away, tried to fight against them, tried to keep herself from being pulled under. But they did not stop. Because this was what the house had been hiding. This was what had been taken from history, from memory, from time itself. This was the moment everything had begun. And Clara Ravenshade had been at the center of it. Lenora lifted her gaze, chest heaving, body shaking, as Clara stepped forward, the ashes curling around the edges of her gown like shadows eager to consume. Her dark eyes were steady, filled with something unreadable, something restrained, something that had waited far too long. "You were never meant to see this," Clara murmured, her voice smooth, deliberate, carrying the weight of centuries of silence. "But now that you have, there is no turning back." Lenora's heart pounded, her fingers curling into the soot-covered ground, her mind still reeling from what she had just seen. "What is this?" Her voice came out hoarse, raw, barely louder than a whisper. Clara tilted her head slightly, a slow, careful movement, her gaze never leaving Lenora's. "This is the truth." The air shifted, the ruins flickering, the world bending at the edges like a dying flame, as if it was not entirely real, as if it was both a memory and something far more dangerous. Lenora swallowed hard, forcing herself to her feet, the weight of the moment pressing against her like an iron chain. "The fire," she whispered. "The night black veil burned, it wasn't an accident, was it?" Clara's lips parted slightly, but she did not smile. "No," the word hung between them, heavy, final, unchanging. Lenora's pulse thundered in her ears, the ground beneath her still unstable, as if it, too, was deciding whether to keep her here or cast her out. "Then what happened?" Clara was silent for a moment, her expression carefully composed, but Lenora saw it now, the flicker of something behind her eyes, something that had been buried for far too long. "I died that night," Clara said softly, and though her voice did not waver, something else did, the world around them, the air, the very foundation of this memory. "But not because of the fire." Lenora's stomach twisted, her breath shallow, every nerve in her body screaming that she should not ask the next question, that she should not demand the answer, that some truths were better left buried. But she did. "Then how did you die?" A long silence. Then, the ruins trembled. The ground beneath them cracked, the remnants of black veil shifting, groaning, the weight of the past pressing against the fabric of this place, this memory, this moment, the truth resisting, fighting against being revealed. Clara turned slightly, her dark eyes flickering toward the remnants of what had once been a grand staircase, where shadows lingered, where something unseen watched from the dark, waiting, waiting, waiting. "I was murdered." The words sliced through the silence like a blade, and suddenly, the ruins of Black Vale collapsed into darkness. Lenora screamed as the floor gave way, as the fire in the walls and the broken glass shattered into nothing, as the world twisted violently around her, as she was ripped from the memory, from the ruin, from the truth, and then she was back. Back in Ravenshade House. Back in the corridor lined with doors. Back in the present, in the house that had never forgotten what it had buried. The door in front of her, the door she had opened, the door she should never have touched, was still ajar, but beyond it, there was only shadow now, only emptiness. The masked stranger stood beside her, his presence steady, but something in the air had changed. The whispers were gone. The house was waiting. And Lenora. Lenora knew too much. Clara Ravenshade had been murdered. And now, the house would make her remember everything. Chapter 21, The Dead Do Not Forgive. Lenora staggered back from the open door, her breath sharp, her hands shaking, her body still caught between the ruin of Black Vale and the suffocating silence of Ravenshade House. The air was thick, unmoving, pressing against her skin like unseen fingers, the weight of what she had seen still clinging to her like soot from a fire long since extinguished. The truth had been revealed in pieces, scattered like shards of broken glass, but now the fragments were beginning to fit together, the edges bleeding into one another, forming a picture that had been hidden, buried, erased. Clara Ravenshade had not perished in the fire. She had been murdered. Someone had ensured that she never left Black Vale alive, had silenced her before the flames consumed the house, before history was rewritten to make it seem as though the fire had claimed her. And Lenora had seen it, had felt it, had stepped inside the memory of that night and been dragged under by the weight of it. The masked stranger stood beside her, unmoving, watching, waiting for her to speak, but she had no words, only the lingering sensation of something far older than her wrapping around her lungs, whispering against the edges of her mind, something patient, something waiting, something that had been denied justice for far too long. The door before her, the one she had opened, the one that had taken her into Black Vale's final moments, stood ajar, but the darkness beyond it was no longer shifting, no longer whispering, no longer pulling her into its depths. Because it had shown her what she needed to see. The house had let her in. And now, it wanted her to act. The floorboards beneath her groaned as she took a slow step backward, her body still trembling, the locket gone, swallowed by the void, but she didn't need it anymore. It had done its part, had guided her to the truth, had unraveled the lie that had been built over Clara's death. The truth was inside her now, carved into her bones, whispered into her skin, and the house knew she could no longer ignore it. A sound broke the silence, faint at first, then growing louder, closer, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the vast corridor lined with doors, each one still sealed shut, still guarding the dead that the house had refused to release. Lenora's breath hitched as the masked stranger shifted beside her, his stance tensing, his head tilting slightly as if listening to something she could not yet hear. Then, a voice. Low. Familiar. Wrong. You shouldn't have done that. Lenora froze, every nerve in her body locking into place, her pulse hammering against her ribs, her blood turning to ice. Edgar Ravenshade stood at the far end of the corridor. His figure was shadowed, half-lit by the dim glow of unseen candlelight, his dark coat pristine despite the ruin that should have swallowed him, his presence impossibly solid, as if the house itself had crafted him from its walls, from its bones, from the history it had chosen to keep. His face was calm, smooth, devoid of the anger or frustration she had expected, as if he had already known she would uncover the truth, as if he had been waiting for this moment as much as the house had. Lenora's fingers curled into fists at her sides, her breath coming in uneven bursts as she forced herself to speak. You lied to me. Edgar took a slow step forward, his boots clicking against the wooden floor, his movements measured, controlled, effortless. I did what I had to. The word slithered through the air, settling against her skin like frost, and suddenly, the weight of all the moments she had ignored, all the whispers she had pushed away, all the warnings she had failed to heed came crashing down at once. He had always been too calm, too composed, too certain of what she would do, where she would go, what she would uncover. He had led her here, had let her step into the house's past, had let her walk into its secrets, knowing that she would find exactly what he wanted her to find. Her throat tightened. You knew. Edgar did not blink. Of course. Rage curled in her chest, hot and sharp, pushing past the fear, past the uncertainty, past the part of her that still wanted to believe he could be saved. Clara was murdered. The house shuddered, the walls groaning under the weight of her words, the whispers beyond the doors rising, a chorus of voices tangled in sorrow and rage, agreeing with her, remembering with her, demanding with her. Edgar exhaled through his nose, tilting his head slightly, something amused flickering behind his gaze. And now you think you understand. The walls trembled harder. The house did not like his answer. Lenora's breath came in ragged bursts, her entire body pulsing with the knowledge that this was the moment everything would change. The house had brought her here for a reason. It had shown her Clara's fate for a reason. And now, it expected her to finish what had been started. She squared her shoulders, lifting her chin, forcing steel into her voice. Who killed her? Edgar's expression remained unreadable, his dark eyes reflecting the dim glow of the corridor, his hands still gloved, still patient, still waiting. What does it matter? Lenora's stomach twisted. It matters to her. The whispers surged, the house shifting, the doors rattling against their frames, a storm of voices rising, waiting, pressing against the truth that had been denied them. Edgar's jaw tensed, the only flicker of something real she had seen in him since she had pulled him from Blackvale's ruins. Clara was a sacrifice, he said finally, his voice quiet, certain, unshaken by the house's growing fury. She was meant to be forgotten. The ground shook, the sound of cracking wood, splintering beams, the very structure of Ravenshade House crying out in defiance. Edgar did not move. Lenora's chest burned. She doesn't want to be forgotten. A silence stretched between them, thick and unbearable, and for a moment, she thought the house itself had stopped breathing. Then, Edgar exhaled, slow and deliberate, before he simply said, "Then she should not have trusted me." The truth hit like a blade to the ribs. Edgar had killed her. The house screamed. The doors burst open. And the dead finally stepped into the light. Chapter 22, The House Takes Its Due. The doors exploded open with a deafening roar, the wood splintering as unseen hands tore through the threshold, releasing the ones the house had kept, the ones whose names had been swallowed by time, by fire, by silence. A rush of air, thick with the weight of centuries of suffering, tore through the corridor, rattling the very bones of the house, howling with the force of all the voices that had been trapped within its walls, a storm of vengeance, of memory, of justice long denied. The dead had come. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were voices, screaming, sobbing, laughing, weeping, pleading, cursing, demanding to be heard, demanding to be remembered, demanding to be seen. Figures moved within the shadows, silhouettes half-formed, bodies shifting between what they once were and what they had become, trapped between life and death, lost within the endless corridors of Ravenshade House, their faces flickering in the dim candlelight, some familiar, some unrecognizable, all belonging to the house now. Lenora's breath came in ragged gasps, her pulse hammering in her skull as the weight of what she had unleashed pressed against her ribs like an iron hand, suffocating, inescapable. The masked stranger remained beside her, unmoving, silent, watching as the house tore itself apart from the inside, as the truth it had buried clawed its way to the surface, as Clara's name rose through the voices, stronger, clearer, no longer drowned beneath the weight of all that had tried to erase her. Edgar stood in the center of it all, the storm of the dead raging around him, his coat whipping in the unnatural wind, his expression unreadable, unmoved, as if he had expected this, as if he had known that once the doors were opened, there would be no stopping what came next. The floor beneath them trembled, cracks splintering through the wood, the house groaning in agony, in fury, in hunger. The very walls seemed to breathe, shifting, curling inward, as if Ravenshade House itself was deciding what to do with them. The figures in the dark moved closer. Lenora could see them now, see their hollowed eyes, their hands reaching, their voices tangling together in a chorus of the forsaken, whispering their grievances, their betrayals, their unfinished endings. And at the heart of them all, standing at the threshold of the door she had opened, her midnight blue gown trailing over the shattered floorboards, was Clara Ravenshade. Her presence was not like the others. She was not lost, not broken, not bound by the same sorrow that clung to the rest of them. She was something else. The house had kept her locked away, hidden within its own decaying heart, but now that she was free, now that her story had been spoken, she would not be silent. Lenora felt the weight of Clara's gaze settle on her, heavy, unyielding, as if she was seeing through her, into her, through every moment that had led to this one. Clara raised a hand, and the voices silenced. The house shuddered, holding its breath. And then, she spoke. "You took everything from me." Her voice was not a whisper, not a plea, not a question. It was a sentence. Edgar's face remained still, expressionless, but something in his posture changed, something in the way he held himself, not in defiance, not in denial, but in resignation. He had always known this was coming. Clara stepped forward, her gown trailing over the broken remnants of the past, her dark eyes never leaving Edgar's, the weight of the years between them pressing into the air like a second storm, charged, waiting, about to break. "You betrayed me," she said, and the walls shook, the windows cracked, the flames in the sconces flickered violently. "You took my life and burned the house to bury the truth." Lenora's breath caught, the final piece of the puzzle snapping into place. Edgar had killed Clara. He had silenced her. And then he had burned Blackvale Manor to erase his crime. And yet, the house had not let him go. It had kept him, twisted him, remade him in its image, shaped him into something that belonged to it. He had never truly left its grasp. Edgar exhaled softly, the first sound he had made since the dead had risen, since Clara had stepped forward, since the house had begun to collapse under the weight of its own ghosts. "Yes," he said, his voice steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I did." The house screamed. The very foundation shook, a violent, shattering force that sent dust and debris raining from the ceiling, the wind howling through the corridor, tearing through the open doors, through the halls, through the rooms that had never forgotten, through the bones of the house that had never stopped remembering. Clara lifted her hand higher, and the shadows reached for him. They surged forward in a wave, in a tide, in a reckoning, curling around his ankles, his wrists, crawling up his spine, dragging him down, pulling him into the floor, into the walls, into the house that had never truly let him go. Edgar did not fight. He did not struggle. He only closed his eyes as the shadows swallowed him whole. And then, he was gone. The house exhaled. The storm stilled. The voices faded. The walls stopped groaning. And for the first time since Lenora had arrived, Ravenshade House fell silent. Clara remained where she stood, her dark gaze fixed on the place where Edgar had vanished, the weight of finality pressing against her shoulders, against her very being. Slowly, she turned to Lenora. The fury in her eyes had dimmed, but it had not disappeared. "It is finished," she murmured, but Lenora could hear it, the thing beneath her words, the thing left unsaid. The house had taken its due. The past had been restored. But the dead never left without a price. The masked stranger spoke for the first time, his voice quiet, certain. "The house must close." Clara inclined her head slightly, as if she had expected this, as if she had always known this moment would come. She turned, casting one last glance toward the shadows curling along the walls, the remnants of what had once been Edgar, before she lifted her hand once more, and the house began to fall. The walls cracked, the ceiling split, the floor beneath them groaned as the very foundations of Ravenshade House tore apart, the structure giving in to time, to decay, to the weight of everything it had held for too long. Lenora stumbled backward, her heart pounding, the corridor around her crumbling, breaking, vanishing as the house itself collapsed in on itself. "Run," the masked stranger said. And this time, she did. She ran as the doors shattered, as the hall split, as the rooms of Ravenshade folded into the dark, into the ground, into the place where forgotten things went to die. She ran as the whispers screamed, as the air turned to dust, as the history of the house was consumed at last. She ran until there was nothing left to run from. And when she finally turned back, when the night settled around her, when the silence became too heavy, she saw it. Ravenshade House was gone. The house that had remembered had finally let go. The dead had been given their due. And Lenora Ashbourne was finally free. Chapter 23, The Ghost That Walks Away. Lenora stood at the edge of the ruin, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her pulse still hammering against her ribs as she stared at the place where Ravenshade House had once stood. The vast, decaying manor that had swallowed her whole, that had whispered its secrets into her skin, that had drawn her into the depths of its forgotten past, was gone. The house had not simply collapsed. It had not merely crumbled into ruin. It had vanished. As if it had never been there at all. As if the ground itself had rejected it, had finally purged the weight of its own secrets, its own ghosts, its own hunger. The only thing that remained was the cold night air, the scent of damp earth, the faint traces of mist curling through the skeletal remains of the trees that surrounded what had once been its cursed foundations. The stars above were distant, silent witnesses to everything that had transpired, untouched by the horrors that had unfolded beneath them. But Lenora was not untouched. The house had marked her, changed her, threaded itself into her thoughts, her bones, her very existence. She had survived. But at what cost? She exhaled slowly, her breath curling in the crisp air, trying to steady herself, trying to convince her body that it was over, truly over. That she was not still trapped in its corridors. That the whispers were not still clinging to her. That she was free. A rustling behind her made her stiffen. She turned sharply, her heartbeat quickening again, until she saw him. The masked stranger stood a few feet away, his presence unchanged, his dark coat barely disturbed by the wind that curled through the emptiness where the house had once loomed. He had not left her. He had not vanished with the house. He had not become part of the ruin. Somehow, despite everything, he remained. And for the first time since she had met him, since his ghostly presence had first appeared in the halls of Ravenshade, Lenora needed to know why. "Who are you?" Her voice was quieter than she expected, rough, raw, worn from screaming, from running, from speaking the names of the dead. The masked stranger tilted his head slightly, the glow of the moon catching the smooth ivory of his mask, making it appear almost luminous in the darkness. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he spoke. "Someone who once stood where you are standing now." His voice was calm, measured, but there was something beneath it, something layered, something that made the air around them feel heavier. He was not like Edgar. He had not been created by the house, claimed by it, swallowed by its hunger. But he had been part of it once. Lenora's stomach twisted. "You were trapped there," she murmured, the realization unfurling through her mind, threading itself between all the pieces of what she had already uncovered. "You were one of them." The masked stranger inhaled slowly, his shoulders rising and falling in a motion so controlled, so carefully human, that it almost felt unnatural. "Not in the way you think." Lenora took a step closer, her fingers curling slightly, her body still tense, still unwilling to fully believe she had left the horror behind. "Then in what way?" The masked stranger turned slightly, his gaze flickering toward the ruins, or rather, toward where they had once been. His voice remained even. "I did not die there, Lenora." A pause. A beat of silence that seemed to stretch impossibly wide. But I was meant to. Lenora's breath caught, the weight of his words settling, taking shape, forming yet another mystery within the endless labyrinth that had already threatened to consume her. The house tried to keep you, she whispered, the pieces clicking together, falling into place. Like it kept Edgar. Like it kept Clara. Like it kept all of them. The masked stranger nodded once. Yes. Lenora's skin prickled. Then how did you escape? Another silence. Another moment stretched too thin. The masked stranger turned to face her fully now, the blackness of his eyes unreadable behind the smooth, empty expression of the mask. I made a deal, he said finally, his voice softer now, quieter, weighted. One that was never truly fulfilled. The night shifted around them, as if the very air understood the gravity of his words, as if the remnants of the house, the echoes of what had once been, were still listening. Still waiting. Lenora swallowed, her mind racing through everything she had learned, everything she had seen, every whisper that had tried to pull her under, and yet she did not understand him. Did not understand why he had remained, why he had helped her, why he had been able to move through the house without truly belonging to it. Then why did you stay, she asked, her voice barely above a breath. The masked stranger's hands curled at his sides, his head tilting just slightly, as if weighing his next words carefully. Because I was waiting for someone who could finish what I could not. The realization struck her like ice through her veins. Me. You. Lenora's chest tightened, her lungs constricting, her body trembling despite the stillness of the night. You knew this would happen. I knew the house would not rest, the masked stranger corrected. I knew it would call for someone, the way it called for me, the way it called for all of them before us. But I did not know it would be you. Lenora's fingers twitched, her hands shaking at her sides. And now, she asked, her voice unsteady, hollow. What happens now? The masked stranger did not answer immediately. Instead, he took a step forward, closing the space between them, and for the first time since she had met him, he reached up and removed the mask. The breath caught in Lenora's throat. His face was not what she had expected. Not grotesque, not hollow, not something twisted by time and torment like Edgar had been. He was young. Too young. Dark eyes. Sharp features. A face untouched by the years that should have claimed him, a face that should have belonged to a portrait, to a memory, to a story she had not yet been told. And then, she understood. Her breath came in a sharp, trembling gasp as she stepped back, as the truth broke over her like a wave crashing against the shore. No, the masked stranger, the man who had guided her, the man who had protected her, the man who had been neither living nor dead, gave her a small, almost sorrowful smile. Yes. Lenora knew his face. Knew his name. Had seen it, buried beneath time, beneath dust, beneath the ashes of a house that no longer existed. She had seen it inside the locket. The name beneath Sebastian's. The name that had been erased, forgotten, silenced. Edgar Ravenshade. The real one. The man she had saved was never who she thought he was. The man she had trusted was never the one who had needed saving. The truth had always been buried deeper. And now, she had finally unearthed it. The real Edgar Ravenshade had never left Ravenshade House. He had never been part of the living. He had been trapped, a soul untethered, a man left behind. And he had been waiting for her. Lenora's breath came in short, uneven bursts as she stared at him, as the final puzzle piece clicked into place, as the ghosts of the past settled into her skin, into her thoughts, into the place they would never leave her. Ravenshade House was gone. But its ghosts were not. And neither was she. The story was not over. It had only just begun.
Every story has an ending. But some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, Don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will personally thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.